Not all tragedies stem from a lack of experience. Some begin when overconfidence leads one to believe that danger can be controlled. What you are about to discover is neither a reenactment nor an internet-born legend. It is the true story of Yuri Lipski, a young diving instructor whose final dive was captured on the camera he carried with him. The footage reveals how, in a matter of minutes, a dream turned into one of the most shocking and disturbing recordings in the history of diving. It all took place at the Blue Hole in Dahab, Egypt, a massive underwater sinkhole renowned for its crystal clear waters and its appeal to divers from around the globe. Now, at first glance, it appears to be the perfect spot for ocean exploration. The entrance lies just meters from the shore, the surrounding walls buffer the currents, and the visibility is usually excellent. And yet that apparent tranquility has led many to make the same mistake, assuming it's an easy dive. With a diameter of nearly 55 meters and a depth exceeding 130 meters, the Blue Hole is considered one of the most dangerous dive sites on the planet. Its notoriety stems not only from its beauty, but also from the staggering number of lives it claimed. Estimates suggest that between 150 and 200 people have lost their lives there. Some bodies were never recovered, remaining in the depths as silent reminders of the risks hidden within the ocean. In April of 2000, Yuri Lipski, a 22-year-old Russian, arrived in Dahab with his family for a vacation. And yet beyond the holiday itself, he had a clear objective. Before returning to Moscow, he wanted to descend to the very bottom of the Blue Hole. For him, this was no mere underwater excursion, but a personal challenge that he had long aspired to conquer. The plan was to execute an extremely rapid dive. He would descend to a great depth, touch the bottom, and immediately begin his ascent. This technique, known as bounce diving, aims to minimize the time spent at greater depths. And yet it entails enormous risks, and it's considered by many specialists to be too dangerous, even for experienced divers. Before attempting it, Yuri sought out local instructors who were willing to accompany him. However, there was a problem that made it impossible to convince them. He would only be in Egypt for a few more days. Upon hearing this detail, the professionals would immediately reject the proposal. They knew that such a brief period of preparation was insufficient for tackling one of the world's most demanding dive sites. Among the people he spoke with was Tariq Omar, a renowned technical instructor who knew the Blue Hole's reputation inside out. He not only offered to train him, but also tried to talk him out of the idea. In his professional opinion, the dive posed an unnecessary risk, and the odds of something going wrong were just far too high. Yuri, however, was determined to go through with it. On April 28, 2000, his final day in Egypt, he made his final decision. With no dive buddy or local guide, he walked to the entrance of the Blue Hole, ready to descend entirely on his own. His background as a diving instructor likely led him to place too much confidence in his own abilities. But what he failed to realize was that in such an extreme environment, even a minor mistake could trigger an unstoppable chain of events. Before entering the water, he carefully checked his gear. He wore a wetsuit, and he carried a mask, fins, a buoyancy control device, also known as a BCD, a weight belt, a dive computer to track depth and time, an underwater camera to record the entire dive, and an air tank upon which every breath of his descent would depend. With everything ready, he began a slow descent. What he viewed as the fulfillment of a dream was about to turn into a desperate fight for survival. Unbeknownst to him, every meter he descended brought him closer to the moment that he would make his name part of one of the diving world's most famous and harrowing stories. There is a detail that many people overlook, one that, in this story, made the difference between returning to the surface and remaining trapped forever. Although commonly referred to as oxygen tanks, the cylinders that are used by most divers do not contain pure oxygen. In reality, they're filled with compressed air, a a mixture composed primarily of oxygen and nitrogen. Now, at moderate depths, this poses no problem, but when descending beyond 30 meters, the pressure turns that nitrogen into an invisible enemy. Little by little, it begins to affect the brain, altering the perception of reality and impairing the ability to make decisions. This phenomenon is known as nitrogen narcosis. Those who have survived to tell the tale describe the sensation as being similar to extreme drunkenness. The mind loses its clarity, reflexes slow down, and even the simplest actions become confusing. And for this reason, technical divers exploring great depths use special mixtures like Trimix, a gas that incorporates helium to mitigate the effects of nitrogen and to keep judgment as stable as possible. Yuri was not using any such systems. He decided to carry out the entire dive using a single compressed air tank, the same type that's typically used for far less demanding recreational dives. Without realizing it, he was entering a zone for which neither his equipment nor his body was prepared. When the recording begins, other divers can still be seen nearby. They remained at a relatively safe depth, while Yuri, fully confident in his experience, decided to break away from the group and continue his descent entirely alone. The camera captures every minute of that decision, revealing the speed at which he was descending. All signs suggest that nitrogen narcosis was already impairing his reasoning, as he never once checked the dive computer on his wrist. He continued to descend until the seabed came into view. Only then did he look up and see the reading that would change everything. The display showed a depth of nearly 90 meters. In that instant, he realized that he had gone too far. Panic began to set in. His first reaction was to try to inflate his buoyancy control device in order to regain buoyancy and return to the surface. But nothing happened. There was a problem that he had never foreseen. The combined weight of his gear, the camera, and its accessories was too great to generate the necessary lift. He remained virtually motionless on the seabed, while every passing second made escape increasingly difficult. Worst of all, his brain was no longer functioning normally. The narcosis was worsening, clouding his judgment just when he needed to think most clearly. At nearly 100 meters underwater, even breathing ceases to be natural. Every inhalation requires immense effort, and the pressure compresses the chest, creating a constant sensation of suffocation. As he struggled desperately to find a way out, time was running out. The camera recorded those final moments until suddenly the image cut out. The time was 5:11 p.m. It seemed like the end of the story, but in reality, it was just the beginning of one of the most dramatic rescues ever carried out at the Blue Hole. 5 days later, that same camera would be switched on again. This time, it was not in Yuri's hands, but in those of Tarek Omar, the instructor who had tried to convince him to abandon the dive. He was returning to the scene of the tragedy in order to undertake a mission few would ever dare attempt, descending into the depths of the Blue Hole to recover the body of the young man who had ignored every warning. And yet fate had a very different role in store for Tarek Omar. Thanks to his rescue experience and the reputation that he had earned within the Dahab diving community, it was Yuri's own parents who turned to him with a request that was as painful as it was inevitable, to retrieve their son's body so that they could bid him a final farewell. Fully aware of the mission's difficulty, Tarek accepted the challenge. Over the course of 2 full days, he descended into the depths of the Blue Hole alongside a specialized team, facing the very same conditions that had claimed the young Russian's life just days earlier. Something unexpected happened during the operation. He found the camera that Yuri had carried during the dive, and against all odds, it was still working. Upon reviewing the footage, he discovered that the device had recorded practically the entire sequence of the diver's final minutes. Those images were far more than a simple recording. They were a real-time record of a tragedy. For a time, Tarek hesitated to hand the material over to the family. He knew that knowing the truth might help them understand what had happened, but it also meant reliving, second by second, their son's desperation in those final moments. Months later, Yuri's mother returned to the Blue Hole to place a small commemorative plaque facing the sea. She was not the only one. For years, the families and friends of other victims did the same, until the site was surrounded by dozens of memorials honoring those who never made it back to the surface. Over time, this imagery cemented the site's reputation and the name by which the world would come to know it: the Divers' Cemetery. Yuri Lipski's story goes far beyond just an underwater tragedy. It serves as a reminder that even experienced individuals can make mistakes when confidence outweighs caution. We often believe that simply knowing an activity is enough to master it. And yet reality shows that there are always limits that should not be ignored. In this instance, warnings were present from the start. Instructors with years of experience advised waiting, training, and preparing more thoroughly before attempting such an extreme dive. However, the desire to achieve a goal quickly ultimately outweighed patience. And in environments where a small mistake can cost a life, rushing often leads to irreversible consequences. This story also reminds us that nature does not negotiate. The ocean makes no distinction between beginners and experts, nor does it forgive overconfidence. Its rules apply to everyone equally, and a single moment of carelessness is all it takes for an adventure to turn into a tragedy. Perhaps the most important lesson here is understanding that asking for help, accepting advice from those with more knowledge, and acknowledging our own limits is never a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it is a mark of intelligence and respect for life. No record, challenge, or dream justifies risking something that can never be recovered. Yuri may have simply wanted to achieve a personal goal before returning home. He never imagined that the decision would make him the subject of one of the diving world's most well-known stories. Today, more than 2 decades later, his final dive continues to be studied, not only for the impact of the footage, but for the valuable lesson that he left behind. Experience may make you more capable, but humility is what truly keeps you alive.